Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. This is Pojo, early in the morning with a little bit of a patch breakdown. We knew it was coming, I didn't know it was coming this soon, so we're going to try and cover it before I head off to work and talk about just a couple of the changes that have happened to some of the cards. There are some new changes to the game as well. We have 75 new puzzles, so I'm really looking forward to trying those out. We're going to record them, I'm sure, and we will put them up on YouTube as we solve them. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing that. For the moment though, let's talk about the card changes. Well, one other thing besides the puzzles, there are now like little founders packs that you can buy, which are ways to sort of get some cool like eternal stuff. You get an eternal throne token for buying some amount of gems. You get the bounty, or yeah, the eternal throne package is 1,000 gems and gives you an eternal throne totem. The bounty hunter package gives you a totem, a complete set of premium sigils, which, well, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, sure, there's no reason why you wouldn't want to do that. Seems like a pretty good deal. And premium Jack avatar with a custom bullet hole visual effects on the playmat. That's pretty adorable. You also get a premium Icaria avatar at like the 6,000 level. Looks like that adds basically nothing. You just get 6,000 gems. So like basically when you buy like a bunch of gems all at once, you also get some other cool stuff. So for a while you're setting up like the founder packages, they're like a limited time only deal that can get you some cool stuff. You can also get like a Mullet and Nakova premium avatar as well. You know, like premium avatars are whatever to me, but I certainly don't mind them having like ways to make money, and none of this appears to be any sort of like balance issue or anything like that, so okay, I'm good. All right, anyways, there is a couple of other things. Invite friends will get you a unique Yeti theme deck with a premium Wump Party starter card. Your friends will receive a unique Valkyrie theme deck as well, which is kind of cool. Also has a premium Valkyrie Spire Guard in it. All right, and yeah, let's get to the meat of the thing, because I'm excited. Okay. Card changes. There have been some nerfs, there have been some buffs. The nerfs, Power Surge has been removed from the game, or rather it has been reworked into just like a standard text thing. And what we now see instead is that the Power Surge cards have all been increased in cost by 1. And effectively can only be cast at 2 or higher. There aren't that many cards that could be cast at 1. In particular, Charchain Flail suffers from this particular effect. Like Flame Blast was a card that could be played only at 3 anyways, and would very rarely be played at even 2. So the fact that these cards can only be played at 2 is not too big a deal. However, they are losing 1 point of damage. So the 2-cost Charchain Flail only deals 1, and then the 3-cost one deals 2, and so on and so forth, because the Power Surge cards have just been mildly nerfed. And same with the Copper Conduit. It is a 1/1 to start, but it costs 2. So if you want to get a 2/2 Copper Conduit, you have to pay 3, etc., etc. These cards were all very strong. They behaved very, very well in pretty much all formats. Flame Blast was the premier finisher for fire decks, so it was in a lot of different fire decks, including like some that maybe it shouldn't have been in. You would often include it in token decks. You would include it in other things. Like it is a deck. It is a card that is very, very strong. This nerf does not actually decrease the strength of Flame Blast that much, but it is enough of a nerf that it'll make people think a little bit less about this card when it comes to other things. I think Charchain Flail probably suffers the most from this, and this is a significant Armory nerf, which is totally fine. There are a lot of good Armory decks out there right now, and Armory probably got some of the best cards in Omens, so I think that's reasonably significant. I really like Charchain Flail. I've always thought it was a very good like anti-aggro tool, so I'm very sad to see this nerfed, but at the same time, it's still a thing that kills Charchain Flail on turn 2, so, or kills Crown Watch Paladin on turn 2, and does like some pretty good stuff on turn 3. Like this kills Silverwing Familiar. It does all the jobs that it originally did. It's just slightly less effective at getting across that final point of damage and at sort of recurring with Smuggler Stash to make some other things happen. There's been a nerf to Smuggler Stash as well, but we'll get to that. So yeah, the Power Surge nerfs are totally fine. I don't like the wordiness of them. I kind of liked Power Surge as a keyword ability, but at this point, there's really only ever been 3 Power Surge cards. Omen's never really had any, so it's not a big deal that it's not a keyword ability. Evelina Valley Searcher has been reduced from 3 to 2, so she is a 2/2 now, and that's pretty cool. I'd say that this is going to help enable dinosaur decks. Evelina was not a card that was particularly strong in dinosaurs at the time, so the buff to her should be pretty good. I would say that dinosaurs in your hand getting +1/+1 has always been kind of cool. Like, Evelina can now be played with a lot of cool explorers, including Amber Acolyte, the explorer that is the 3/1 that fixes. That's really useful for setting up dinosaur decks, and that's like a really good deal for Evelina. I think that as a 2/2 that gives a dinosaur in your hand +1/+1, Evelina can now be played for base value. Like, she actually gets a decent amount of value even if she's killed, so that makes her a pretty powerful card. Should be really fun to build dinosaur decks with her, and the next thing on our list is in fact a dinosaur card. So let's go ahead and talk about that. All right, so let's see if I can get this going. Yeah, awesome. All right. It looks like it needs a little bit of moving. Okay, so we have a bunch of mild buffs to Omens cards as well. Avarax Familiar has gone from a 1/1 flying warp with +1 maximum power to a 1/2 flying warp with +1 maximum power. That's useful because, in particular, it gives you better flying blockers in situations where you have Xenon Obelisk out, which is something that's going to happen with Avarax Familiar. This card was one of the weaker warp cards, and I think that this is a pretty reasonable change. It's a very powerful card in its own right for that power surge effect. Like, being able to just get a free power surge is very, very nice. But in practice, Avarax Familiar rarely influenced the board in a way that was very meaningful, and oftentimes just got killed incidentally in ways that you really didn't want them to. This also makes Avarax Familiar a better draft card. Anything that gets a draft card above 1 typically makes it a lot less vulnerable to many of the fairly standard removal cards in draft, which includes Snowballs, Tempers, there's Amethyst Acolyte. There's so many different things that kill 1 health units in draft, and so few things that kill 2 health units in draft, or like comparatively to ranked. I think that this is a good buff, and Avarax Familiar should have a little bit of fun as a result. Also, better dinosaurs for Evelina Valley Searcher, so all good there. Crownwatch Squire 1/2 now, as opposed to a 1/1. This card was a decent aggro setup. Pretty tricky to run in draft, not really loved very much in ranked. I'd hope to see more of it in both draft and ranked as a result of this. I would say that the 2 health certainly helps. We will see how much. I'm not sure if it's made an impact before, so this at the very least will get it on the map. Inspire. This is a big change. 2 cost for Inspire. Top unit of your deck gets a Warcry and draw a card. So, yeah, Inspire was a very good card and kind of a degenerate one in the fact that it was a card that you could play 4 of in pretty much any green deck, and your deck would just be slightly better because of it. Like, it was better than Levitate for that reason, because Levitate is sort of a little bit more conditional. It pops Aegises, it does a lot of cool tricks, it tends to be very good at getting things across, but the thing that it doesn't do is just increase the quality of your cards. And if you're not playing 1-drops, Inspire is just always a 1-of in this deck. And like, yeah, Inspire saw a lot of play. This is a nerf in particular to Armory decks again, but it was also just way too good with relic weapons. The card Tinker is now very comparable and possibly even better than Inspire in this situation, and Tinker is actually a pretty reasonable card to be playing, so I would say that this is sort of a push towards using Tinker as an alternative to Inspire. This design is still pretty strong. I wouldn't say that it's super crazy good. I'm not sure if it's even playable in Armory anymore, but it's an interesting card to have, and certainly if you're trying to just cast a bunch of spells, Inspire might be a thing that you can do to set that up. But yeah, that nerf is very significant. I would say this card is a lot weaker because of it, and it very likely might not see any play. Okay. So next up is Fencing Master, which is now a 3-cost with only 1 green influence as opposed to 2 green influence. This just makes the card a little bit more playable. You could probably end up running it in ranked. Fencing Master always had synergy with blue decks, and that was really weird because Fencing Master is double green. So that is a pretty significant change. Let me make sure that that is in fact the change. I'm not... Yeah, it was 3 JJ. So yeah, that's a pretty significant change because it does allow green-blue decks to have a little bit more fun with Fencing Master. This card does get to be a 5/5 very, very quickly as a result of its ultimate. So a 3-cost 5/5 in a deck that's just running straight aggro with cards like Flash Freeze and Chill. Well, not Chill. The Ice Sprite or... yeah, there's a lot of good stun options. In Jaral's Frostkin is a particularly good one, and you can run, of course, the Yeti Icebreaker deck. I would say that there is a Huru aggro archetype with Fencing Master that exists that is much more viable now that Fencing Master is playable. That's actually pretty cool. I like this change a lot. This is very, very good for the draft environment, and it's very, very good for ranked. But also, this card is probably going to irritate the crud out of me in the draft environment because a 5/5 that after you've stunned a unit is just a lot of crazy nonsense. So yeah, get your Flash Breezes out and consider picking this up in draft. It's really crazy. If you want to build the Icebreaker deck, this is definitely a green-blue card that really loves it. So solid stuff. Okay, next up on the list, we're going to go ahead and save that and get that all together. Thank you to the kind Redditor who posted all of these up. I do not have access to the Eternal client yet, so, or like, yeah, the servers are offline for me, so I'm just getting these out of pictures. And I have to go to work. Anyways, Watcher of the Big Ones, 3/6 for 4. So a couple of things that have changed here. The main one being that it is a little bit cheaper as opposed to a 5-cost card. This card didn't quite work at 4/6, or so I've heard. I never actually got a copy of it in time to test it. But yeah, it is a mentor card that was just having a few problems. There aren't enough cheap mentor cards. Getting a 5/6 down, 5-cost 4/6 down is typically very bad for value, and in ranked, which is the only place that you're ever going to play Watcher of the Big Ones, it would typically get killed before you got a chance to mentor it. Oftentimes it was pretty low impact. The 5/5 Carnosaur is a really big deal, but at the same time you aren't getting so many good mentor effects off on it, and like you play a 5/6, then you exhaust the 5/6 next turn so it can't attack, and you get another 5/5. That didn't work out quite so well. This completely lowers the clock on Watcher of the Big Ones by a pretty significant amount. It also gives you a decent defender against Sandstorm Titans, which blue always looks for. Basically, that's something that it's a card that blue really wants more answers to. Polymorph is the primary one at the moment, but Watcher of the Big Ones is another one that you can sort of play opposite to Sandstorm Titan and develop your own board. So that's pretty cool, and yeah, I'd say this card has a lot more good stuff going with it. It is no longer a dinosaur, which is something that's fairly important to note. I don't think that's actually highlighted on the card, but it's only an explorer at the moment. So that's fine. I don't think there's a crazy dinosaur synergy. Well, there is. There's a Abarax at the moment. But for the most part, Watcher of the Big Ones can be played pretty easily and is an explorer, so it can trigger Evelina and do some other cool dinosaur stuff with your deck if you want to build big dinos. I think there's a bit more support for that in particular in this patch, so give your big dino decks a try. That seems like a really good idea in this setup. Okay, Cat Burglar is a 3/2 now for 3 instead of a 2/2 for 3. As a deadly unit, this is a little bit weird, but it does mean that the card does have a lot more pressure in terms of attacking. Deadly units are really not a card that your opponent wants to block very often, so being able to be offensive with Cat Burglar as opposed to defensive with Cat Burglar is very strong, I would say. This makes the card a lot stronger in draft, and it also makes it very strong in ranked. I would say this is a playable card in ranked for sure now. And ranked has always had yeah, the ability to get rid of a relic in your opponent's hand is very strong. I would say running Cat Burglar is pretty cool, and you should definitely do it. Like, that seems like a pretty good card to be running for what it does to your opponent's stuff. Basically getting rid of Xenon Obelisks, getting rid of Chalices. Any sort of Chalice hate is definitely a good idea at the moment. Like, that deck is kind of obnoxious on the ladder at the moment. And yeah, Cat Burglar definitely does the job. Okay. Next up is Minotaur Lighthoof, which has been nerfed from 5 health to 4 health, and has actually been reduced in cost to 4. This might be a buff. Yeah, this is definitely a buff. I was thinking that as a 5 cost, it was a little bit... like a 5 health is certainly a decent amount of health, but no, yeah, that's a pretty significant buff to it in draft. I would say this card is even better in draft than it was before, and it was already pretty good in draft. As a 4 cost 4/4, Minotaur Lighthoof is now on the same scale as... the Arachnodon. What is it called? It's a 4/4 Arachnodon. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's 4 and 2 time for a 4/4. So Minotaur Lighthoof now has the same stats, but a better skill. Shadow cards do not traditionally have better stats than time cards. So Minotaur Lighthoof is pretty cool. That card should be on the map for you. This is a really solid draft card and potentially has some ranked play value now. As a 4-cost 4/4, it's pretty close to being efficient. It's not amazing, but the unblockable ability is very strong in infiltrate decks. I can see Minotaur Lighthoof being played in ranked now. All right, my favorite. Here we go. Buff to 8 of the Huru. We haven't actually managed to put out our Eternal Brews deck on 8 of the Huru out yet, but we are definitely going to in the near future, probably tomorrow or today. Would be my best guess. Let's probably shoot for tomorrow if we can. But yeah, and hopefully if we don't get it by then, we'll get it up on Friday. But yeah, the basic thing about 8 of the Huru is that it was already a pretty good card. Stabilized you in a lot of different formats. I liked this card a lot. I think it's very, very strong. What it does now is draw you 4 cards instead of 2. And that's awesome. Like, absolutely. I am all for that. So, like, 8 of the Huru getting a little bit more oomph is totally fine at its current cost, because 8 of the Huru has always been a card that you're just trying to play in order to win a game that you are losing. And this is just going to make it a little better at its job. It's really funny that adding 2 cards to the card is not a significant buff to the card. Like, I would say that this card is still a card that wins the game most of the time when it's played, and that was what it did anyways. But drawing 4 cards is a lot more exciting, and it's a lot more fun, and it's definitely going to help you out against some of the bigger control matchups, which is really, really nice, because the Huru actually struggled against, in particular, Chalice decks, I think. So, like, yeah, being able to completely win every control matchup is very, very important, and that's pretty cool stuff. I would say that 8 of the Huru is a much better card as a result. It's well worth casting. It's well worth cheating out. It was already really, really good. So yeah, that's really cool. I am very excited to play with this new card. Okay, there's 5 more, so we're going to go ahead and talk about those, and should be lots of fun. Let's go ahead and save them to the correct spot. There we go, there we go, there we go. All right. Oh yeah, so I called out that Redditor who posted up. That is... well, we'll get to it in a second. Okay, so we have a buff to one of the standard sort of draft weapons. Royal Fruit is the Redditor. All right, so here we go. Bloodletter is now a 3/3 as opposed to a 3/2. This is a very powerful weapon now. This card was playable before, I think, and it might have been, it was playable in draft even. Argenport aggro actually had a real love for this card, I would say. It tends to get overpassed just because inefficient weapons don't appeal to people, but I would say that 2/3 versus 3/3 is not that inefficient. Bloodletter now makes any 1/1 immune to Torch. That's very, very important. It gives the wielder lifesteal, which is a pretty big deal. It is stat efficient. There are not that many stat efficient weapons, and the ones that do exist are really, really crazy. I would say that Bloodletter is definitely on the map now as far as ranked goes, and in terms of draft, this is a card that is just absolutely worth playing. Like a pretty bomb draft rare even. You know, like, weapons are fairly bomb anyways in draft if your opponent doesn't have removal. I don't think this changes the matchup too much, but it does make the card a lot more invulnerable, and the lifesteal swing is very, very important. So, yeah, pretty good change. I am all for it. Okay, Smuggler's Stash. This is the big one. This one costs 6 now. So, big nerf in particular to Armory decks. There are a couple of other decks that I really liked Smuggler's Stash with that probably aren't very playable now. But as a 6-cost draw 4, it's still a pretty powerful effect. I would say that this is not a significant nerf to Smuggler's Stash, although it is something that is definitely going to limit the Armory decks a little bit. And since Armory decks are all about sort of eking out basically the utmost value at any particular point, the nerfs simultaneously to Inspire and Smuggler's Stash mean that you're going to have to change up your Armory strategy a little bit, and in particular aggro Armory is going to be a lot more favored. So any of the Armory lists that we've seen, like inexpensive Armory, or anything that has like sort of like the more aggressive style, that's going to be a better Armory deck now than the slower styles, which use a lot of Smuggler's Stashes, because Smuggler's Stash was just the best card in Armory by a very large margin. Yeah, at 6, this card is not unplayable. Certainly, every time a card goes up in cost, it feels like it is, but I would say that this card is still very eminently playable. It's not going to make a lot of difference to the overall matchup, but all the same, you're probably going to run less copies of it, because that is a significant cost, and you're going to be wanting to run like maybe 1 to 2 as opposed to a full 4 in most of your Armory decks. And yeah, beyond that, the card still provides amazing value. It is an expensive card, but it is a card that often has a lot of definite bonuses to it. And combined with the Charchain Flail cost, this is a pretty significant nerf to the Charchain Flail stash strategy, which I would say was a little bit degenerate, but maybe not too crazy. In any case, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time getting those giant Charchain Flails now. It's not going to be, again, too big a deal, but I would say that that is enough to make that strategy a little less playable in ranked. And Smuggler Stash still being a good card is probably not in question, but as the nerf happens, I would say that this is definitely going to take Armory decks down to a level where they're not as competitive with some of the other lists. So yeah, really interesting card, and Armory not shutting down a lot of lists actually probably means a decent change in the meta, as there will be a lot of other things that can play around Armory now. So interesting stuff. Could be a really interesting meta in the future to come. So we will see how well that works. Okay, Blood Call Invocation is now 1. A very needed change, I would say. Blood Call Invocation was kind of on my list as one of the weaker cards in Omens. Like I've seen it played in draft. I never really drafted it much myself, but I did when I was drafting with roommates. We tried it out once or twice, or like looked at it, and just there was never really a need to cast it in draft. In ranked, you just never wanted to cast it because you could just run Blood Call Invoker, or like this. Getting the activator was just very tricky. The life force ability means that typically you're doing something to gain that life, so paying an extra 2 on top of that was typically too much of a cause to play a blank unit. I would say Blood Call Invocation is a much stronger and potentially very aggressive card now. Like at this point you can now do some cool like lifesteal shenanigans and then get a couple of Blood Call Invocations out very quickly and get some very, very large units very, very fast. You can also play it alongside your smaller 2-drops, so if you're playing like a decent amount of lifesteal and then just like playing some like cheaper stuff, Blood Call Invocation actually feels pretty good. You can now do Rapid Shot on a lifesteal unit plus a Blood Call Invocation for like a 6/6 on like turn 3. That seems pretty good, like if you can get a lifesteal unit out very early. I would say that Blood Call Invocation has some aggro potential now, which is pretty cool, and it might be a little bit more playable in draft, which is nice. Still a bit of a fringe pick, but a card that has some real value now, so good to see that Omens buff. Alright, Banish is now 3. I think people complain about this card a lot in terms of what it did, but it was a very powerful card in its own right. Now that it is cheaper, it should be pretty meta-defining. I would say that this is going to make Relic decks a lot worse. It's going to make Chalice decks a lot worse in particular, and the Xenon Obelisk, like Praxis style, should be pretty likely to get knocked down as well. Because Banish is now an efficient removal spell, it will be very, very good at getting rid of a lot of things that have kind of dominated the format for a while. Sandstorm Titan, Xenon Obelisk, Crystalline Chalice. There's a lot of things at 4 or less that Banish will be just 4 of in decks now, and you're going to have to figure out exactly what it is that you're willing to have banished, and whether or not you want to run real relics at 4 or less, with Banish being such a likely card in Xenon decks. In particular, Xenon decks have been probably the least supported of the ranked factions at the moment. Skycrag has seen a little bit of play with the aggro style. Xenon hasn't really found its footing yet. I would say that giving 4 Banish to any Xenon deck is probably a pretty strong buff, and so hopefully we'll see that particular faction pairing take off, and should be really, really cool. Okay, one last one, and this one's kind of a fun one. It's not a major change by any means, but certainly makes this card a little bit more reachable. Mask of the Torment, the last card on my list. Okay, hold on a sec, let me just figure out how I do this again. just forgot how to do it after. Okay, it's in here somewhere. It should be. I don't know why I can't find it. Wow, I can't find the file to save. All right. Anyways, well, we'll just go ahead and maybe this last one is actually saved as like a JPEG or something. So we'll save it again and see what happened. Anyways, it's all good. So yeah, this last one is Mask of the Torment. Mask of the Torment now costs 20 to play the Tormentor, which is that 8/8 flying charge overwhelm. Go ahead and browse for this. Yeah, the last file is a PNG, which is why that was not working. Anyways, so we will go ahead and yeah, there we go. There we go. So yeah, this one is the ultimate costs 5 less. Mask of the Torment was not like a card that was making a lot of moves, but now that the Tormentor is significantly more accessible, I would say that it has a bit more strength. Getting to 20 off of Mask of the Torment is not very hard. I would say that that's actually a really interesting Life Force deck that you might be able to build. I don't know the power level of this yet, but I'm eager to experiment with it, and I'm pretty excited to see how it goes. So we'll figure out what happens with that. Should be lots of fun. I don't have much to say about this particular change. Mask of the Torment was not on my radar yet. I don't have copies of it, so we will be building a deck with it sometime soon, but at the moment I don't know what Mask of the Torment can do that we haven't already set up. So it's cool to see, and certainly the Tormentor is going to be pretty powerful. I think Mask of the Torment decks are a lot of fun, so yeah, that should be a significant buff to it, and we'll be excited to see what happens. Okay, that's it for me. I have to get off to work now, but this was a lot of fun, and I will be back tonight, I think, with some of the puzzles, as well as working on that Ada the Huru deck that we love so much. So I will see you guys then. Have a really good night, and cheers to you all.